Our guest today is Tavis Piatoli, and he has worn many, many hats, and I think some things our listeners might find impressive are, he was the sports dietitian for the New Orleans Saints, for the New Orleans Pelicans. He's worked with college athletes at Tulane and elsewhere. But I really got to know Tavis through the Taylor Hooten Foundation, which is an amazing organization that provides education around steroids and supplements for youth athletes. I'm excited to flip the script here because Tavis interviewed me for the Taylor Hooten All Me podcast, which is the first time I got to know him. And we've kind of worked in conjunction with each other a few other times. But he also is the co-founder and director of My Sports Dietitian. And we'll put the link up for our viewers here at the end, and we'll also put the link in the comments, and we'll read it out as well for our audio podcast listeners here at the end, as well as the Eat to Win nutrition app. And we want to talk a little bit about that as well, in the course of our conversation. But we're just going to keep it very loose, and we'll see where things go. And kind of, the way I wanted to start with you, Tavis, was obviously you find this topic to be important, and you're passionate about it. And, I'm sure you're met with some resistance. And so when you work with youth athletes, adolescent athletes, high school athletes, how do you go about convincing them about the importance of nutrition, and how much of an impact does it really play? Because kids care about winning and performance and outcomes. And so what's your hook?
Yeah, no, that's a phenomenal question, because it's my favorite population to work with, because you have so many different habits and behaviors you can really change. And really the key is I call nutrition, it's the missing link or the secret weapon. It's the piece of the performance puzzle, because as we know, performance has so many different components to it. Obviously the strength and conditioning, the mental component, you have genetics, you have sleep. So many different factors, but nutrition is the piece of the puzzle most young kids don't even think about until they realize, oh, wow, I have to invest in my diet. And to me, it's the piece that really connects everything together. But to get buy-in it's really tough, because they're not thinking about it. We did some surveys and working with athletic trainers and working with individuals. We actually asked 500 kids, give your diet a grade, A, B, C, D, or F. 86% said B or higher. And we're like, wow, we're either surveying some really good eating kids or kids that just don't really understand what good nutrition is. And then we went back and asked them some questions, how many fruits and vegetables, how often do you eat, different things about their diet, a qualitative assessment. If we had to grade it, we probably would have given them a low D or a high F. So that made us realize the perception is I think I'm doing well, but in reality, I'm really not. So for me, because parents call me and say, hey, my son or daughter, we really need, they need nutrition help, but they don't want to hear it from me. And I have a 10-year-old daughter, and she even says, Daddy, I hate your job. And it makes it sound like I'm some kind of like food police, which is not the case, right? But for me, it's using my background, working with the professional teams and the professional athletes. I still have really great professional athlete clients that I work with, that using those names sometimes can help. Although to me, it doesn't really make a difference who I work with. I prefer to work with a high school athlete versus a elite pro, because there's so much room for improvement. So using my background, saying kind of like where I've been, my history, really gets them to kind of go, oh, wow, you've helped this person kind of get to this level by making a few changes. Maybe this stuff really does work. And it really, we try to focus on, when we're working with teams, high school teams, we tell someone, hey, give us your most motivated kids. We want the kids that are going to be the influencers for the others, the ones that once they get results, in the weight room, on the field, and they're saying, hey, I brought food to school. I changed my diet. I did things that I'm eating breakfast now, and I wasn't eating before. And it results into massive changes. The question is no longer, what are you taking? Because everybody thinks they need to take something to change their body, when there's not very many, if any, supplements that are going to do much of that very quickly. It's the game changer when it comes to getting kids to buy in as other kids are doing it, but also showing them this is what athletes are investing in. Colleges now are spending millions of dollars on nutrition, because they realize, great, we have strength coaches, we have athletic trainers, very critical piece of the puzzle. But if the kids are poorly fueled, doesn't matter. Their engines won't run very well.
Yeah, you know, the buy-in part is so spot on. I mean, I am called the food police in my house, and I have done my best. I grew up with a father who was very invested in nutrition, and I know what's right. They know what's right, and they still continually will make like poor choices. So that buy-in piece is really big. And I see like when they have a coach who's invested in nutrition, or someone like if they were to hear your talk and they might buy in, and then it lasts like a little bit of time, right? It's like, okay, for a week, they're going to eat healthy. So my question, Tavis, and I don't know if this is the right way to go about it, but I've often found myself trying to get them the healthy foods, but like decorating it with bad stuff. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, well, they're getting the salad, but I'll give you a lot of ranch on it. Or, you know, they're getting the fruit, but I'll put it on a waffle with some syrup. Like, is that a good approach or a bad approach?
Yeah, no, it's not a bad approach by any means, because there's too much going on around demonizing food. You know, there's too many programs out there that, you know, label food as like, let's say carbs. Everybody wants to do like the adults. Let's jump on the keto bandwagon or do this or that. You know, and we got to stop doing that. That's not going to solve a problem. That's not going to fix, you know, a lot of the things. With a young kid, it's just really being a positive influence with what you're eating. Number one is a big factor, but also looking at it as balance. I don't like to label things good or bad, because that creates an unhealthy relationship with food. So it's really about, hey, how do we incorporate balance? If they want ice cream, sure, we fit ice cream in there. If they want a little bit of cookies, we fit that in there. It doesn't have to be looked at as bad. But if fast food is 5 or 6 days a week, then we probably say, let's cut that down to 2 or 3 so we can incorporate more balance and increase the quality of the diet.
So give us some ideas then, Tabs. I love that. Certainly sounds more manageable to the balance and the moderation, right? But give us some ideas, some tips on what an athlete in general. We'll get into some specifics later, but what should an athlete, a young athlete, be ingesting on a regular basis, and what should they try to stay away from? Again, knowing balance and moderation is key here.
Yeah. Well, the first thing we try to do is we try to change patterns in timing first. 40% of young athletes don't eat breakfast, right? And I'd say 70% of the kids I've worked with try to gain weight and build muscle. So skipping a meal, especially breakfast, is going to prevent them from reaching any goal. That's the one thing I try to tell them is, if you're skipping the first meal, that's going to negatively impact what you're trying to accomplish. From a quality standpoint, you know, it's not like there's magic foods. There's no superfoods and all these labels we put on things. Like, there's no food that's going to increase performance, and there's no food that's going to decrease. But if we take the look at the entire Compass diet, 85% of what we're putting in our body should be pretty balanced, lean protein. So, you know, whether you're an animal-based person or a vegetarian, we can get good quality protein from both sources. So whether that's chicken, fish, turkey, lean beef, eggs, protein powder, good lean quality protein sources. I call them state championship protein. Then we have the state championship carbs, the thing that's going to fuel our body really well. That's your fruits, that's sweet potatoes, rice, pasta. But it's looked at as bad, right? It's looked at as, oh, if I eat that, that's bad. But you're talking about some young athletes that are burning some kids are burning 4,500, 5,000 calories a day. They need high quality carbohydrates for their engines to run. Without carbs, they're not going to do any type of high anaerobic, high power, high energy type workout. Every study shows their body's going to break down. So those quality carbs are really important. And then high quality fats. We need high quality fats as well, because that helps our body absorb fat soluble vitamins like vitamin D, which most of our world is deficient in. But, you know, the olive oils, the nuts, the nut butters, the avocados, those are healthy, good fats that our body could utilize as fuel. But for those that need a lot of calories, that's a great way to increase calorie volume without increase caloric intake, without increasing a lot of volume of food. So it's just a balanced approach. And then the other 15% of the time, throw the cookies in there, throw a little fast food. I mean, it's just about looking at what someone does and how do you make it a little bit better by, you know, changing the quality.
Are there like good, I know you hear like whole grains or brown rice pasta or brown rice. So if your kid isn't into those kinds of foods, like do you get anything from the white enriched pastas and the white rice. So you shouldn't be giving yourself a pat on the back if you're at least getting those in. That's not really helping.
The only difference is a couple of grams of fiber. And honestly, when you combine a meal with protein, let's say chicken, rice, and vegetables, whether or not it's white or brown really has no relevance at all. Because they did studies on that. I mean, most people don't sit down and eat a bowl of white rice by itself or even a bowl of brown rice, right? I mean,
Right.
maybe some people do, but that's where this whole insulin, blood sugar fluctuation, hype and stuff that's going around saying, oh, insulin, this and that. Again, there's a lot of bad studies on that. There's a lot of good studies that show, yeah, we need to be concerned about how much we're eating if we're inactive. If you sit all day, you don't need as many carbs as somebody who is training for 2 or 3 hours. And adults like us that might sit behind a computer for 8 or 9 hours, we don't need the amount of rice, pasta, and bread that a 14 to 18-year-old kid who is burning a ton of energy needs. So it's almost like your car's parked in the driveway. You don't need to fill it up. If you're driving 3 or 4 or 5 hours a day, you need to put gas in it. So, yeah, I mean, the whole rice thing, there's not really a big difference. The calories are still the same. And at the end of the day, the calories in and calories out is the formula that's going to lead to whatever outcome you want to change. If you're trying to lose weight, we have to be in a deficit. And at the most important thing is protein and calories. If you're trying to gain weight, we have to be in a surplus in order to see that body weight change. And there's little things we need to do in between there when it comes to balancing carbs, proteins, and fats that can keep you full longer and give you more steady energy. And that's why I tell everybody, good quality carbs, the fruits, the vegetables, a little bit of a higher fiber with good protein and healthy fats. You have better blood sugar stability, more steady energy. If you wake up in the morning and let's say you have a donut, blood sugar's up and down, you're probably going to be hungry in an hour. Versus if you have, let's say, a bagel with egg and cheese on it, you're going to be more steady.
Got it. Okay. So I like that. I like some of those specifics you were just offering. So let's kind of go that route. Let's go with some more specifics. So let's say it's game day. This is always one that I find is interesting. Everybody's different in terms of what their preferences are. When I worked in the NFL, I mean, people are eating spaghetti and meatballs for breakfast. Some people are eating an omelet. Some people are eating pancakes. And so what are your suggestions in terms of foods on game day? And then what about timing of eating prior to a competition?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of do's and don'ts for game day. I give all my athletes like what's called the pregame meal halftime nutrition kind of guide to say, hey, avoid this stuff. And some of the things we have to avoid are really considered really well balanced. You don't want a lot of, high fiber rich foods, gas forming vegetables that are just going to cause a lot of stomach distress. The broccoli, the onions, the cauliflower, the red beans, although those are good, nutritious, rich foods, you don't want those 3, 4, 5 hours before an event. That's going to probably cause some stomach discomfort and an athlete's not going to feel comfortable. Also, you don't want a lot of fat. So you don't want fried foods, fast food, anywhere near 15, to 24 hours, 16 to 24 hours before competition, because it's going to sit in the gut. It's going to make you feel so sluggish and heavy because it takes a long time to digest. So
that's dinner before, the night before is when you're saying you cut these.
Yeah. So if you have a game the next day, I mean, unless it's like a night game, that's okay. But still, I wouldn't do a big fast food meal. If you have a game that morning, I wouldn't do anything like that 24 hours before, just because there's going to be a lot of inflammation in the body because of the food's poor quality, number one, but it's also typically a lot of fat and a lot of calories. The things that are a little bit easier, just faster digested things. So pasta's fine, but depending on the individual, I wouldn't cover it in Alfredo sauce. I'd have it with a lean source of protein, probably just a light salad with it or some fruit to get some extra carbohydrates, because you want carbs pre-game. That's going to kind of increase that storage. One of the problems I see, let's say high school football, kids eat their games at 7, pre-games at 3, and they're not doing anything else until 10 o'clock that night. So second half performance is usually impaired because they're out of gas after the first quarter for the most part, and they're just rehydrating as much as they possibly can. So there are things we've done at halftime of football games, whether it's really fast carbs. It might even be Rice Krispie treats. And it really just depends. People go, what's the best thing? I mean, it depends on the individual. Everybody's different on what works for them and what their body can digest and handle. So there's really no best food and there's no worst food. It's like, let's see what works for that individual athlete to help them metabolize that food.
Are oranges like, that's sort of been a typical halftime? Is that could be a good thing, or?
It could be. If someone
Yeah.
has trouble digesting, high acidity based foods, that might not be a good thing for that individual. Same thing with bananas or any other foods. Some people, they defy everything that goes against the science. And that's one thing with this practice is sometimes science doesn't make sense when it comes to just reality. What you do in a lab cannot be replicated on the field, rarely ever, unless you're a runner, because most of the studies on performance look at treadmill performance, right? And for a football player, a baseball player, volleyball player, that doesn't translate to what they do on a court or a field or a match. We see that in a lot of sports. We just have to look at, hey, what's worked for you in the past? Let's try a few of these things and let's see how your body feels and reacts to it. Obviously, we never do anything new the day of a game or a match just because you don't know what's going to happen. So we try to stick to some things that they felt comfortable with in the past.
So, many of our listeners have kids who, they'll go to a tournament, whether it's volleyball or baseball or soccer, tennis, golf, and their athletes are competing early in the morning, let's say 8:00 game, 9:00 game. I understand that, it's individualized and it's in some ways trial and error to see what works and what doesn't work. But what would be your starting point in terms of what time should they eat and how much in general should they eat prior to a game?
Yeah, and the volume is going to depend on that individual and their history. Mm-hmm. So, if they say, hey, my match is a tennis match at 9, I watched Wimbledon yesterday, and it's like that starts a little later, right? It's like a 2:00 England time. Here it's like 7:00. But let's say you have a 9:00 match. Well, typically I'd like them to get something in their system at least 2 hours before, depending on what they tolerate. If the parent and the athlete say, look, I have a history of just my nerves are really shot. I'm anxious. I throw up everything before a match. Then maybe we try a smoothie. Maybe we say, look, maybe can you make something liquid? Have you tried that? I try to ask questions to see what they haven't tried before to see, will this work? Will just a plain bagel, like a half a bagel with honey work? That way it's not too heavy. It's quickly digested. You get some carbs in the system. So the volume really depends on the individual. I have some kids, an hour before an event, they can eat a full breakfast and they're rocking and rolling. And it's like, okay, well, that's fine. I mean, if that athlete can tolerate, a full breakfast 2 hours before and they feel good and they've done that for a while, then we use that as a base. But if they don't, then we try to use what may work if they haven't had success in other areas. So there's never like this is that one approach to use with every type of athlete.
But so like ideally having a good amount, I understand what you're saying that like depending on the kid, like two of my kids hate to eat breakfast too early. And I'm always like trying to shove it down their throats, thinking they're going to have no energy by the time we go on our 3-hour drive or 2-hour drive, get to the field, warm up, and you can't get anything in them. Ideally, you're saying 2 hours before having something, but would an actual meal be ideal, or is that too much 2 hours before?
Well, yeah, if you're getting up and then you're in the car 2 or 3 hours traveling, then we want to probably get a full meal in if we can. Again, we have to go based on if you can get that full meal in and whatever those calories are, depending on that athlete, then let's do that. We can make a lower volume option though. So, you can make, let's say 500 calories. I could make it a whole table of food, or I could make it a fist worth of 500 calories. So it really just depends on going back to that athlete. It's, can we get them enough calories in? And then what's the next 3 hour, 4 hours look like if you have a gap? Maybe it's a lighter breakfast in a snack 30 minutes before, 45 minutes before. And maybe that snack's liquid and it's not solid, or maybe it's a half a banana with peanut butter or a peanut butter and honey sandwich. There's just, again, there's so many different scenarios we can work on, but it all depends on that athlete.
Is caffeine ever okay? I've been super tempted and probably have had my coffee and been like, take a sip when my kid is sort of, conked out next to me and we're getting ready to get to the game or to the practice field.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of the most well-researched, we call them ergogenic aids, it's not considered really a supplement, but it's one of the most well-researched performance enhancers that's been used. So if it's a cup of coffee now, let's not use pre-workout supplements. That's a big problem I see in the supplement space when it comes to young athletes is they think, they need some kind of caffeine booster in a powder. There's a lot of risk, that we talk about when we're doing our programs with the Taylor Hooten Foundation on what we need to be careful with on caffeine side, because energy drinks are a big no. Pre-workout supplements a big no. But if it's a cup of coffee, that can enhance central energy, mental energy as well, and focus. And it can be beneficial if the athlete is not sensitive to it.
Mm-hmm.
So, couple of things I want to follow up on, Tavis. You started to talk a little bit about hydration and then supplements. So I want to make sure that we touch on both of those. I think those are two important things. Let's talk about hydration first. So, the thing nowadays is, kids are always carrying around these water bottles, and always, I think we've hammered in their heads, hydrate, 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 hydrate. So how important is hydration? How much should youth athletes be drinking? Can you drink too much water? And then I want to talk a little bit about recovery after, and talk a little bit about good sport as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, hydration is one of those nutrition components or topics we don't really probably address enough. And it's kind of one that can really fix a lot of problems. Typically, the first sign of fatigue is due to dehydration. And a starting point for how much you should be drinking is at least half your body weight in ounces. So if you're 100 pounds, 50 ounces, 200 pounds, 100 ounces, plus what you would lose with training or practice. So, now down in the South here in New Orleans, it's hot. It's July, it's August. It's going to be brutal. Like most places, even in the Pacific Northwest, I saw they had like 116 degrees heat last week. So in those cases, you need more. You need to look and see, am I losing weight? If I lost 2 or 3 pounds, typically for every pound of weight loss, you want at least 2 cups or 16 ounces of fluid. So we gotta start with at least half, and then with output, every hour of activity, I would say at least another 12 to 16 ounces of fluid would be important. Drinking too much, absolutely, especially if it doesn't have electrolytes. Too much water, if you're 100 pounds and you're drinking a gallon, that might be way too much. That could lower your blood sodium levels and cause what's called hyponatremia, and that could be life-threatening. I mean, we don't see it that often. You see it more on the endurance athlete side, like the triathletes that might be not drinking any electrolytes during an Ironman or a half Ironman. That's where we see those electrolyte disturbances. We don't typically see it in youth sports too much. But yeah, too much can be bad, if you're going way above what your recommended needs are.
So I have a kid who hates drinking water. So you said fluid. I caught you said fluid, not water. So I'm assuming if it's caffeinated, no, that doesn't count. But is it? Can you count it as fluid if it's a non-caffeinated drink? And then what about the electrolytes? And what about some of the sports drinks and the recovery drinks? How does that count?
Yeah, they all count as fluid. I mean, it's all, it doesn't have to just be plain water, because if someone doesn't like water, then we have to figure out a way, how do we get that fluid in their system? Because it doesn't matter if it's water or not. Fluid is fluid as long as it's non-alcoholic. That's really a lot more worrying. And obviously with youth athletes, we should hopefully don't have those issues.
Hopefully not.
But a cup of coffee, I wouldn't look, that's not dehydrating. If you're drinking maybe 4, 5, and 6 cups and you're not drinking any fluid, that's going to have a diuretic effect and may cause a problem. But, that's, again, probably a pretty rare case unless you got kids, consuming a ton of energy drinks, which we do see from time to time. But any type of beverage, whether it's a sports drink, whether it's milk, orange juice, water, a non-calorie based fluid, those are all going to count towards your fluid totals. So we can definitely look at that. Even something like an unsweet tea or even a sweet tea, if somebody needs those calories.
So how does that help an athlete?
Yeah, I mean, recovery is a very important component just to help your body rebuild, because whether you're lifting weights, whether you go to a practice, let's say for 90 minutes to 2 hours, your body's doing a couple of things. It's number one, it's emptying the gas tank, right? It's like driving a car. You go put out a lot of energy, and then what's called glycogen, it's when you eat carbs, it goes to the liver and the muscle. It's called your gas tank. It's called glycogen. It pulls from that, right? And that's to use so your muscles have the ability to move. And to the point where you get no more glycogen, you're exhausted. So that's one thing recovery does, is it repairs that gas tank. It refills the gas tank. Also, with protein, when you're lifting weights, you're not building muscle. You're breaking it all down. It's called protein breakdown. And when you consume calories after, carbs and protein, that's increases what's called protein synthesis, the rebuilding of muscle tissue. And that's where your body repairs itself and rebuilds. So that's another component of recovery. And that's what I like about things like milk. It helps kind of kill two birds with one stone. You get the glycogen restoration, you get some protein restoration where it helps with muscle repair. When you said electrolytes, what does that do? Well, electrolytes have a lot of different functions, from muscle contraction. And that's one thing: magnesium, sodium, calcium, potassium, all are focused on muscle contraction. So if we're depleted in those electrolytes, it could cause some muscle excitability, some cramping. You combine that with dehydration, it could cause some problems. I mean, magnesium as well as potassium is very important for heart rhythm. So if you're completely deficient and you're only drinking water and your potassium's low, or even if it gets way too high, sometimes some of these drinks have way too much of certain things. We don't want that to go too high. That could cause a problem. So it's just trying to find that right balance and using it at the right time, particularly during and after workouts, are going to be important when your bodies are losing those types of nutrients.
So you mentioned the electrolytes. Can you drink too many electrolytes? I see kids always sipping on sports drinks. Not good sport, but I'm talking about other sports drinks which shall remain unnamed. Prior to all day long drinking that instead of water or something else. So what happens if you drink too many electrolytes and not enough just water?
Well, I've only seen really one company that has a product that has a lot of potassium. It's potassium rich and low in sodium. Obviously, I won't name names. You can kind of look at that once you find that product. We have to be cautious there that you're not drinking too many of those. We've seen some cases where blood potassium levels get above 5, and really when it gets really high, like above 5.2, 5.3, that can be very dangerous. It can cause an abnormal heart rhythm, cardiac arrest. So we don't just want to be drinking these things all day as your only source of fluid. Water is obviously great. Adding some electrolytes from sodium and potassium will be very important, just to have a little bit of balance. There's no like perfect balance, because it really depends on the body weight of the individual. There's so much that goes into that, and a 300-pound lineman is going to need obviously a lot more electrolytes and fluid than a 100-pound athlete. But it's just really about balance. We can consume too much, and we have to be careful. That's why it's important for these drinks to have at least a lower dose. They don't need to be extremely high, because we're adding salt to food. We're eating foods that have these same nutrients as well.
That was going to be my question. I think you sort of just answered it there. It's not necessarily a one size fit all, right? So there's certainly foods and drinks that are healthy and that you want to focus on. But a female athlete versus a teenage athlete versus the kind of sport that you're doing, it's all similar, but then you need to know your own program and your own goals and your own body.
Absolutely. Yeah, every athlete, sports nutrition is sports nutrition. No matter what sport it is, the same principles apply. The only difference is going to be, let's say, a swimmer. Most swimmers, especially in the bulk of their season, they're swimming 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the evening. So they're putting in 4 hours of high intense work, versus maybe someone in the off season or in season, they might be only doing, a 2-hour practice, different sport. So they just have different calorie needs and different timing needs, but the same principles of quality, nutrition, timing still apply. It's just helping them understand and show them, hey, this is what that's why when I work with an athlete, I want to see what their training schedule is, their school schedule, their eating schedule. I look at all of that. Mm-hmm. And then I look for the deficiency and say, oh, wow, you haven't eaten in 6 hours here between, breakfast is 6 a.m., lunch is 12. We got to find a gap there. Or lunch at school's 12. You're not eating until 7 o'clock at night. We got to fix that gap there, because if not, your patterns are going to be all over the place.
One thing, Dr. Sam, before we move on, if you were to say, if it was your own kid and you could only choose 3 foods and they were getting ready to have a game, and I know this is going exactly the opposite of what you're saying, like you got to eat a lot, but what would those 3 things be? I do want to know, like, all you can get are 3 things. What are you giving them before a game? For energy, for focus? Is there a way, can you think of 3?
Yeah. I mean, I can probably think of 3, and we can pick categories. I mean, protein, carbs, and fats, right? But it would be predominantly carbohydrates. So whether that's and again, there's no magic food. So whether it's rice, pasta, bread, I would choose a carb, and I would probably pair that with a with a fruit, just where we can get
So
some
wait,
extra.
what carb? What carb would that be? You
Again,
got to choose. Okay.
If I had to choose, a starch carb, I'd probably go potato because it's the most filling.
Okay.
So I'd probably choose a baked or sweet potato.
Okay.
That's got a more satiety effect than the others. From a protein standpoint, there's no magic. So, I'd go chicken, fish, turkey. Again, it just depends. There's,
Okay.
there's again, again, there's no like one that's better than the other. That's
right.
Again,
that's why
I
you're
don't
not.
like those type of questions.
Okay.
Because,
Taste dictates. Okay.
yeah, I mean, it really depends on
Yeah.
that individual because
Right.
I've seen kids eat fast food before a game and they scored 40 points, and it's like, wow, that shouldn't happen, right?
I know.
So,
And what was the third one? The third group was you said, so we have a protein,
Fat.
we have our carbohydrate. And so what's your fat?
well, and again, I'd probably keep the fat as low as possible. But if I had to choose something, I'd probably choose like a peanut butter or a nut butter and put it on bread. Or again, if it had to be on the potato, then we might put a little cheese on there just to where we have a little bit of fat, and that cheese has some protein as well, just for sustainability.
Okay.
But again, people might look at that and go, "Oh, you shouldn't have dairy." That depends on the athlete.
Yeah.
If
Okay.
lactose intolerant, like Dr. Sam's
You're not
family,
gonna have chips. Yeah.
don't do that. So dairy is
Got it.
not.
Right. Okay. So we have and we have more questions for you too, but I want to get to these audience questions here. We had two pop in there. So the first one's from Sarah, and it says, "How do you feel about protein powder supplements for kids to try to increase their daily protein intake?"
Yeah, a couple of things. It's fine. It's protein. It comes from milk, so it's a convenient way to get some calories. My daughter's 10. She plays a couple of different sports, and we make a smoothie once or twice a week, especially if we're running late in the morning. I'll take a little bit of protein powder, some milk or almond milk, peanut butter, and then a frozen banana, throw a little spinach in there, and we blend it up, and we're out the door. So it really just depends on if you need it for convenience or they're not getting enough protein. That's a really convenient way to get that, especially maybe after a workout. If they need a lot of calories before bed, I'm having some athletes make smoothies just because they need a lot of calories. And sometimes eating more food, after dinner is not really that attractive, but they can do some liquid.
Is there a certain type of protein powder that whey, or there's all these different types, and so if you're uneducated like me, what recommendations do you have in terms of type of protein powder?
Yeah, I mean, if we're getting specific to like really scientific and hey, what works the best for muscle recovery, whey protein superior. That's what the research tells us. At the same time, not everybody can tolerate whey, and that's fine, because a lot of the plant-based proteins today really do a nice job of having a complete protein. They're using a couple of different types of, whether that's beans, whether that's, they use chia, hemp, pea protein. There's a lot of those plant-based that can still accomplish what you're trying to accomplish, and you still have a quality. What's really important, though, is you want to make sure it's third-party tested. So if it's third-party tested and certified, that means like NSF. NSF is a third-party testing company. We work closely with them, with the Taylor Hooten Foundation. That means the product has been tested for prohibited substances. We see athletes testing positive for things like steroids, things like banned stimulants that would cause them to lose eligibility or not participate in Olympics. We want to make sure it's NSF for sports certified, so it's third-party tested.
Great. And thanks for your question, Sarah. And then Elise had a question. When will your Eat to Win sports nutrition program gain weight, build muscle, and improve athletic performance be available? Also, do you have a similar program for an athlete that needs to lose weight? This might be a good chance for you to also talk to us about your Eat to Win sports nutrition program and kind of what you do.
Yeah, so the Eat to Win, it's part of the company My Sports Dietitian, and it's not an individual program. It is, but what we do now with that is we have a team of about 18 sports dietitians, and we're providing virtual sports nutrition services to high schools and colleges all across the country, to where we educate them. We have dietitians working with them in a one-on-one setting, a team talk setting, just because there's schools that they can't afford a full-time person. So we're using technology. That's what the Eat to Win app is. It's a nutrition app that instead of having athletes track what they eat, like other apps where you have to log at, you're not going to get a 14 to 25-year-old kid to do that very often. Most of them won't. So what the Eat to Win app does is it provides a customized plan. You don't have to think. It basically gives you your breakfast options, lunch, dinner, snacks, depending on how many meals you want to eat. Those programs I think she's referring to really are customized when we're working with teams. There are some options for people to work in that environment, and if they reach out, one of our team members will reach out and kind of get them started on that. So we have options for weight gain, weight maintain, and weight loss as well. But what we've done is we've done a series of 70 videos. Each video each week has a different theme. It might be about breakfast. It might be about snacks. It might be just about meal timing. And it's about a 3 to 5 minute video where we talk about a specific topic that day. So each day they get a new video, depending on what their goal is, to try to help them change behavior. And we're teaming up with a couple of different research institutes. We're going to be looking at eating patterns and behaviors of young athletes. My business partner has a great relationship with Pennington and Baton Rouge, Pennington Biomedical Research Center. So we're going to be looking at a lot of research over the next 5 years to study what influences what young athletes eat. How can we help them and use technology to improve those decisions?
Great. So let's just talk about losing weight and gaining weight. You had alluded to, I think you said 70% of your clients are trying to gain some weight, and then there may be some people that are trying to decrease body fat, and, change their body comp. And this is a slippery slope. As a psychologist, this concerns me in terms of body image and body dysmorphia. And so what tips or what are the do's and don'ts in terms of gaining weight and losing weight? And, what should parents be concerned about?
With a young individual, not adult, just a young individual, the weight loss, like you said, it's a very slippery slope. Kids are going through hormone changes. Their body's changing, and so much changing. And we don't want to put them in a big old deficit. We don't want to restrict unless that athlete has a significant amount of weight to lose. So if they're 100 pounds overweight, we might want to looking at ways to help them make better choices. I tell everybody, you've been on a diet since birth. You never go on one. But that's why 92% of people fail on diets. And that's, people have tried so many diets, especially adults. It's because they weren't perfect on day 2. They give up on day 2 because in their mind, they create this life of, I wasn't perfect, so I should just start again on Monday. When everything you eat is your diet. You never go on one and get off one. So with a young individual, it's really more about looking at what they're doing and how do we make it better? How do we eliminate some of the calorie dense foods that have no nutritional value? Are they drinking sodas? So if they are, let's say they're drinking 2 sodas a day. That's 300 empty calories they're consuming. How can we go to 1? Are they eating fast food 5 days a week? How do we go to 2 days a week? How do we just shave off calories any place that we can replace them with something a little bit better without making them feel they're restricting, right? Because once you make someone feel they're restricting or they have to, most people think I got to starve myself and go on 1,000 calories. Yeah, that's going to work quickly. You're going to gain it all back every single time because you're going to hurt your metabolic rate and you're going to lose muscle tissue. So we have to be smart about it. Weight loss should always happen in a slow progression. If you need 3,000 calories to maintain, you should probably start at around 2,600, 2,500 to where you hit you hit a plateau, you drop a little bit more until it's manageable. But we have to, again, it's with a young individual, 9 out of 10 times it's the quality of food is why they're struggling to gain weight. They're eating a lot of sugary-based foods or high-fat foods and fast food meals, empty calories that are not providing any nutritional value. On the opposite spectrum, they're typically doing way too much activity is why they can't gain weight. I see kids that are doing 4 and 5 and 6 hours of movement a day, or they think, I got to get that extra. I weight lifted at school and I did conditioning for 2 hours. I got to go do it again for 2 more hours. And I'm like, no. Or I got to go play pickup basketball with my buddies for 2 hours. And it's like, okay, you can do that. But keep in mind, any more activity means you got to eat that. You got to get those calories back if your goal. Right. So when I show them, I'm like, hey, you need 5,000 calories a day just to probably see a pound a week weight gain. They're like, oh my gosh, that's a lot of calories. So I tell a lot of the parents, look, your son or daughter is doing way too much. Mostly guys come to me with the weight gain. I rarely see females that want to gain weight. They mostly want performance, right? Most of them really want to change performance. I do see some, but I just have a heart to heart and say, look, something has to scale back. There's no reason for them to be 3 hours at school for a 7 to 10 workout, go to a private trainer, go to a pitching coach, go to this person. It's like, when do they eat? So
in the car.
Yeah. And well, to that point, for busy parents, sometimes fast food is the only option, or you have to do it quick. Is there one kind of fast food that might be lesser of the evils? I have one in my mind that I'm always sort of going with, but I was curious for if you have an answer for that.
Yeah, we do one in our house. It's called Chick-fil-A Friday. It's just a little tradition. Every Friday morning, my daughter and I do that before school or before camp, and that's it. And I'm not, again, I sound like the food police. The only reason I don't allow any other fast food is because I read the book Fast Food Nation about 20 years ago, and I saw what they did to like where the food comes from, and I'm like, I'm never putting that again in my body, right? Again, not saying you can't, but she'll get an egg white grill. I'll let her, she'll have some hash browns, and she'll get a lemonade or a diet lemonade, and I'll get an egg white grill, and we're on our way. We don't do regular fast food just because I don't see any benefit in doing that. And you can overcome that if you're on the road for tournaments. Why not pack food? Can you take the night before and make 10 sandwiches and get trail mix and get fruit and nutrition bars and things that you don't have to rely on vending in fast food? But if you do, every fast food restaurant has at least some couple of healthy options to where maybe it's grilled chicken, maybe it's the grilled nuggets, maybe instead of fries you can get a salad, or maybe have a hamburger without the fries and replace it with something a little bit healthier, like a salad, or Wendy's has baked potatoes. So there's ways to build healthy meals around it. It's just, can we do that?
Right.
So there's probably healthy options wherever you go, as opposed to just saying this is the chain that you should go to, right?
Yeah. I'm not saying don't go to those chains. Every one of those chains have really decent options for you to choose to make healthier choices.
And some not so great options too, right?
You can get all your calories in one day for one value meal at some of those places.
Sure. I know. Boy, when they started putting calories up on the count and on the menu or up on the board, then that changed my decisions for sure. So, okay, one last question before we wrap up here, Tavis. Similar to the sports psychology space, I find there's a lot of people who are so-called experts working in the field who may or may not have the appropriate training or credentials. I find the same in the nutrition field. So if a parent is listening and they want to find a sports dietitian to work with their son or their daughter, what should they look for? How should they go about finding somebody? What are the appropriate credentials to look for?
Yeah, this is the whole nutrition space. There's a lot of influencers in this space, right? And it seems like the people that have the most followers have the least experience. They just, they have the physique, they have some good buzzwords, but they truly don't have the credibility and the background to be doing what they're doing. But we don't spend time chasing that. We only can do what we do and do best. A couple of things we have to look for. Number one, you want to make sure they're a dietitian, right? We are the experts when it comes to nutrition education. We have 4 years of school, a year of an internship, but that doesn't really make you a sports dietitian. Really what makes you a sports dietitian for myself was getting that practical knowledge when I first started with Tulane Athletics in 2002 and just learning, because we didn't have a lot of sports nutrition and understanding of what that was 20 years ago. Working with athletes, it's important for that individual to know what sports are and have played sports. But also we have what's called the CSSD. It's a board certification in sports dietetics. That's, it started, I think, about 10 years ago. It's a new certification for individuals to be board certified. That means they have at least 3 years of experience and I think over 1,500 hours working with athletes. So that's an important credential, for those that are just entering this field and working with teams. But also, you want to make sure, no offense to other dietitians, you want to make sure that dietitian is not just someone who's worked in a hospital and has not had any experience with sports, because you don't want to put me working in a hospital as a dietitian because I have no clue what I'm doing. I know sports nutrition. I don't know the clinical side of things like we're all trained, because I've been 20 years removed from that. So having sports experience and working with athletes is very, very important.
Great.
Before we say goodbye, Tavis, sorry, Sam, I just wanted to ask, how much do you talk about, or is your work involved with the healing powers of food? Like, we're talking about obviously recovery for athletes, But what about for the moms and dads that might watch this and, you know, who are sick or ill or have had cancer? Like, can you just sort of, I know it's a huge topic and I'm not trying to go in deep into it, just sort of talk about the healing power of food?
Yeah, I mean, well, if we look at whether it's an injury or an illness, you know, foods we eat have a couple of different properties. They can be anti-inflammatory. They can also boost the immune system. You know, when we looked at COVID, for example, vitamin D, zinc, selenium, turmeric, or curcumin all had certain benefits, whether they were antiviral or pro-respiratory. From the healing process, when we look at athletes, I'm a big fan of certain nutrients for inflammation. Just about every college and professional team uses tart cherry juice. I'm a huge believer in omega-3. You know, omega-3 fish oil, salmon, or just fish oil supplements are part of every athlete I work with's program. And that's a whole nother topic on the quality of that, because you don't want to go buy 98% of the fish oil in the market. It's not very good. But that's part of everything. If you get your omega-3 index scores above 8%, you're probably not going to have much inflammation, good cardiovascular health. But also, we're using omega-3 to treat concussions today, because 60% of your brain is fat, 25% of your brain is DHA, and we see less inflammation in the brain when we do so. So there's certain things that really make sense from the fruit and vegetable side. You know, a lot of our fruits have anti-inflammatory properties, vegetables as well. You know, they have healing properties in the fact that it can boost our immune system and help our body recover faster.
Awesome.
That's great. I love how, you know, if you're a regular listener to our podcast, I love, Tavis, how, you know, unintentionally probably, but you connected our, we had a concussion expert on, we had a sleep expert on where we did mention tart cherry juice. We had Adam Beard from the Chicago Cubs talking about high performance on one of our last episodes. And so we're hearing a lot of the same messages, which is good for our listeners. So it's consistent messaging. So want to absolutely thank you for taking the time, and for our listeners for weathering our challenges, and sorry for the late start, and especially to our sponsor, Good Sport, who you know, who has provided us with some great opportunities to share information with you, and thanks to their support. And definitely please try Good Sport out. You can buy it on Amazon. There are 4 flavors as of now. I saw you have the orange, it looks like there. Asia, is that right? The citrus?
Citrus.
Okay. Yeah. And so I think I saw berry, fruit punch, citrus, and lemon lime are the 4 that are out there. So please check it out. And then for those of you who are viewing or listening, you can connect with Tavis on Twitter at Tavis Piattoli. That's Tavis Piattoli. And also on Instagram via the same handle at Tavis Piattoli. And then his website we mentioned earlier was mysportsd.com. And then he does have the Eat to Win app as well. Thank you so much, Tavis. I jotted down a bunch of notes, and as we always tell our guests, that's at least our barometer for how informative it was. And when we have pages of notes, then we at least feel like, all right, great, this was really helpful. And I'm making my kids listen to this, watch this replay tonight as soon as they get home from their sports camp. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Tavis. That was terrific.
Thank you both. It's been an honor to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to be on your show.